Tonight is the formal beginning of the end for the Cherera 4. A tribunal is imminent and the outcome is very unlikely to be a surprise. It's a late night for the National Assembly as the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee recommends a presidential tribunal to probe 4 commissioners accused of misconduct by 4 petitioners. And the hustlers are finally getting their cash as President Ruto finally launched the fund. We are dialing *254# and following the steps. Jamila's memo is back tonight with a note to parents and teachers and a word of welcome for clarity and direction for the CBC education system. Gashura's punchline, or should I say punch, sends members of parliament rolling into their recess. Kaikai's kicker declares a victor's justice at the IEBC. And on my take, we could make our exams less bureaucratic with fewer politicians and fewer guns. Here's the news gang.
His Excellency the President appoints a tribunal to deal with the matters in accordance with Article 251(5) of the Constitution. And number 3, that His Excellency the President suspends the commissioners hearing pending the determination by the tribunal.
I am in JLAC, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, but it has come to lack justice and come to lack fairness. It has become a kangaroo committee. One day, this will bite us.
When illegalities are to be committed, we normally extend time. It is wrong, Mr. Speaker. And today is one of the days, is one of the dark days in our country when illegalities are going to be committed in this country, Mr. Speaker. This House cannot be a party to draconian tendencies. We cannot contribute to one in this country to the dark old days. The dark old days of dictatorship. The dark old days of brinkmanship.
When your party leader directs you, even as he did in the JLAC committee, to lead you to walk out of a committee of parliament, then you belittle the people who elected you, and you are telling the people who elected you that you cannot make decisions as leaders by yourselves, that you have to wait for your leader, party leader, to direct you on which meeting to attend, when to walk out, when to stand, when to sit.
What a heated session that was on the floor of the House, and that is all to do with the 4 dissenting IEBC commissioners. The gang is here tonight, fully constituted. Lady, gentlemen, Jamila, it's good to have you back. Look, that was what happened in Bunge. Before we get into, the contents of the report, let's just update, our viewers. The Justice and Legal Affairs Committee had, tabled its report to the main House, recommending that the President form a tribunal. The House debated, as we saw there. Francis, what happened? The House, we understand, has adopted that report, right?
Absolutely. And
so what next?
As we speak now, the House has adopted the committee report, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee report. That report had recommended the suspension of the 4 commissioners and establishment of a tribunal to investigate allegations leveled against them. Key among them, gross misconduct. And this has everything to do with the activities that we saw at the Bomas of Kenya on the verification of the presidential election results and the eventual walkout that they staged and addressed a news conference at Cherera and left the chairman of IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, and commissioners Boya Molu and Abdi Yakub Gulie to announce the presidential election results. Remember, they subsequently went to the Supreme Court and filed a counter affidavit, a counter case, while IEBC is a commission, and the chairman and the 2 commissioners were saying everything went well, the process was free and fair, they identified with the presidential election results. The 4 commissioners took a different position. Of course, we all know that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of what IEBC team was saying and threw away the consolidated petition. But as it stands now, the recommendation by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee that has been adopted by the House now proceeds to the President. It's a constitutional process now, and the President is now directed is recommended, is required now to establish a tribunal to investigate the conduct of the 4 commissioners and tell whether there are any grounds that are sustainable to kick them out of office. But suffice to say, the goose is cooked for the 4 commissioners. And this has everything to do with a number of circumstances that have occurred. Number one, you remember the JLAC team, the 4 commissioners declined to appear before the team. They tried to injunct the process by saying the committee has no jurisdiction. Then they claimed they would not get justice.
Fair hearing,
and the fair hearing, their lawyers walked out. When the matter came to the plenary, we all knew what was going to happen. And because this is a political process, and politics is also a game of numbers in the county, in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, as well as in the plenary. The president is expected to form a tribunal to investigate their conduct. The president has already pronounced himself on the 4 commissioners. Actually, the term he used was rogue. So these are 4 the tribunal will be established by the president. The president has already pronounced himself on the 4 commissioners. The committee of the House has already pronounced itself on the 4 commissioners. The plenary has also done the same. So as it stands now, their chance of getting out of it and retaining their jobs on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 point something.
Even Waswahili call it chuma chao kimotoni. As Gashuri is saying, their goose is cooked. And, you know, the signs were there from the beginning, from when JLAC sat, from last week, when we heard about the 4 petitioners who came to bring their petitions before the committee. And you could clearly see, yes, there were those delaying tactics by as a member of parliament in the beginning, saying this is not going right, you need to make a ruling on this and that, and eventually they walked out. But then now we hear the president's pronouncement, as Gashuri said in the tweet, calling them rogue. And this was one of the reasons that I think pushed these IBC commissioners to not appear before the tribunal. In fact, one of the lawyers, I think, we have the soundbite. I think maybe you can listen to the soundbite by the lawyer, Apollo Mboya. The president has already decided the Cherera 4 are rogue. Before we continue.
Any issue of jurisdiction further having been raised and decision having been given. The tribunal will be formed, appointed by the person who has already determined the rogueness of those particular people.
And they said this tribunal, the process is already predetermined, following the pronouncement by the president, said you're not going to appear before it. But then, even if you look at how this process has been from the beginning, one would say it was almost bound to happen, depending on which political outfit ended up being in power. It is now Kenya Kwanza. Maybe if Azimio had been in power, maybe we would have been seeing this same process about on being this whole process, but now the commissioners would be Wafula Chebukati and the other 2 commissioners, because it had been clear that there had been that divide from the beginning. There are those who would say, well, before August 15th, when they appeared at Serena and said, oh, we don't agree with the results being around at Bomas, what had they done to warrant them being brought before JLAC to want to be, because of what had they done, or the gross misconduct, what else had they done? And some would say that there were signs from the beginning that there were issues in the commission. Remember when the ballot materials were being brought in the country, they said they were not aware. So hii ni kitu ambayo ilikuwa inatokota, as Waswahili would say, na imelipuka afterwards after the elections. But then why would you put them through this process? Maybe just get them to resign. Because we know we look at history, and it's a good teacher, and we look at what happened in 2015 during the Ahmed Isaac-led commission, and what led to them ultimately resigning. Yes, it cost us about 315 million because you needed to pay them for the period of time that they are not going to serve. But then now the JLAC process has started. It's almost complete. Now we're going to the next phase where now the president is going to form a tribunal to look into their conduct. But then now this is going to be a bit long drawn out, considering the fact that now ultimately their goose is cooked. We have Wafula Chebukati and the 2 other commissioners finishing their time in January. What happens to the IBC? How long will this process take? Sure, I know the president is supposed to form a tribunal, but then after the tribunal sits, there's a period of 30 days to decide the fate of the commissioners. But then now, what does that leave us in? I think in December we have some by-elections. what is the fate of that?
Yes, yeah. And you know, we'll come back and talk about constituting the commission, because Parliament also passed the IBC Amendment Bill of 2022. So we'll come back and talk about that in terms of future steps and what happens now. But I think, like we've all been saying, Linus, no surprises here. You know, this is a political process, and you know, what next when it comes to the tribunal?
I think by as early as tomorrow, we will hear the direction this matter will take. And we could easily and comfortably project that maybe before the weekend, and that makes it Friday tomorrow, we will hear the formation of a tribunal to investigate the 4 commissioners. What this will immediately mean, there's something very consequential that happens. The moment the president names the tribunal, the commissioners stand suspended. And that means they cannot transact business in the manner of commissioners on behalf of IBC. It basically marks, like you said at the beginning, Yvonne, the beginning of the end for the Cherera 4. But what we're also seeing here is a continuation of the contest that we had in August. Remember, the IBC showed the divide from the very beginning along political fault lines. So much so that we had this ugly split screen on the day of the announcement of election results, where on one side you had one commissioner in the name of chairperson Wafula Chebukati, and on the other side we had the four who were doing a press conference at Serena Hotel. And 2 who are nursing injuries. And 2 who are supposedly nursing injuries from the chaotic events of the bombers of Kenya. So it's going as predicted, as predictably it should have gone. Basically, what we're going to witness is the victor's justice, where, you know, the winner now imposes his will. And that is exactly what is happening. Because when you look at the JLAC, it's a political process. When you look at the conclusions they have looked for, they have played to the law. Just go to the law, go to the Constitution, Article 251, and invoke it. Get the president to name a commission, sorry, a tribunal, that will then mean the 4 stand suspended. Because there is no other process of getting rid of commissioners. If their time has not expired, you really have to raise serious grounds. And you could see in the motion that was being passed by Parliament today, they cited violation of the Constitution and other laws, gross misconduct, things like that. And it was uniform for each of the commissioners, the 4 commissioners that were accused. So the political skinning is going on, and what will happen as early as tomorrow is there'll be a tribunal in place, and the 4 stand suspended, and the beginning of the end begins. Yeah, and you know, like you mentioned, it's a political process, one that is, you know, the fault lines are those of the campaign season, and I want us to listen to some of those MPs from Azimio's side, Opiyo Wandayi, Junet Mohammed, and they had some things to say about how they felt the process is being conducted.
The President appoints a tribunal to deal with the matters in accordance with Article 251(5) of the Constitution. And number 3, that His Excellency the President suspends the commissioners herein pending the determination by the tribunal.
I am in JLAC, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, but it has come to lack justice and come to lack fairness. It has become a kangaroo committee. One day, this will bite us.
When illegalities are to be committed, we normally extend time. It is known, Mr. Speaker. And today is one of the days, is one of the dark days in our country when illegalities are going to be committed in this country, Mr. Speaker. This House cannot be a party to draconian tendencies. We cannot contribute to what's happening in this country to the dark old days. The dark old days of dictatorship, the dark old days of brinkmanship.
When your party leader directs you, even as he did in the Jailer Committee, to lead you to walk out of a committee of parliament.
And that party leader, it's no secret who he's talking about. And we want to talk about him because you remember Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, was Martha Karua there?
Yep.
Yes, at the JLAC sittings last week. Yeah. So they were there to show their support. And of course, on the same thing, and I just want to follow up on that. Yeah, you can see their pictures there, including Makau Mutua. This was last week, and this shows you just clearly how this is a political issue, and it will carry on together with counsel for both the petitioners and the 4 IEBC commissioners. But I want us to now, listen to what the options are for the Azimio leaders, because Azimio leader Raila Odinga did have something to say about what his options are and what they're considering. So if we can play Raila Odinga talking about mass action and his plan with that, and of course a response from the head of state.
To warn this regime that we will not sit back and watch a return of the Nyao regime by another name. If deepening and widening the divisions among Kenyans is what the UDA regime wants, we will only be too happy to help them along that path. The injustice being inflicted on the IEBC commissioners, if it proceeds as currently conceived, will mark the beginning of a massive pushback against the Ruto and those who think like him by the people of Kenya. We will openly and robustly lead that pushback.
I do not think organizing demonstrations and getting Kenyans to do the things they want Kenyans to do is part of holding any government to account. They are free to criticize what we are doing. That's okay with us. Street demonstrations, street fights should not be part of the script of any responsible opposition.
Yeah.
Politics playing out again.
Absolutely. There's something that Linus called it, the victor's party. And you could tell the first attempt to save the Cherera 4 was at the JLAC sittings. Stall the sittings, injunct them, and delay it, and hopefully the House will have concluded its sittings and gone on recess, and then maybe come back and reintroduce the discussion next year. Remember, the House has adjourned today, and it will come back on 14th of February 2023, except only if there will be special sittings. Most likely on Wednesday and Thursday, there are likely to be special sittings because there's a pending matter on the Commission on Revenue Allocation Commissioners.
Yeah.
But all other business that needed to have been concluded has been concluded. Yeah. The IEBC Act Amendment Bill has already been passed. This is the bill that will help establish a selection panel that will recruit the IEBC chairman or chairperson and commissioners. 2 others. Yeah. Because Chebukati, Molu, and Gulie, their terms end on 17th of January. So there needed to be a panel that will recruit their successors. But be it as it may, the House has already concluded on this matter on the JLAC report and submitted the report to the President to establish a tribunal, of course, after the plenary approved that. So basically, the political contest that would have happened at the JLAC level, at the plenary level in the National Assembly, has already passed. And it has passed in the negative for the Cherera 4. So whatever they could have done to avoid, or whatever the Azimio team would have done to avoid
it getting to where it is now.
It getting to where it is has already been defeated. Yeah. So now, I think now the discussion shifts to the options for the Cherera 4.
And what are those options?
The options are, 1, stay put, wait for the tribunal, and face the tribunal. That is option 1. Option 2 is to look around and see the public lynching, if I may call it, that may happen at the tribunal and opt out. Number 3 is to use the court process to stall the process
of the tribunal.
Okay. That is also another option. Unlike the 2015 scenario that Jamila alluded to, you see, the circumstances are quite different. At that time, it was more of political pressure for the then commissioners to exit to pave the way for reconstitution of another commission. But in this case, the winning presidential candidate and the winning or the ruling party and coalition have already set their eyes on the four commissioners. And so they will use their numerical strength in the House, like they have at the committee level and at the plenary level, to kick out the four commissioners. And lastly, still the president has the discretion to select the panel or the tribunal. He will decide who sits in that tribunal. Of course, this
is not a conversation.
It's not a conversation.
You know, where the minority gives its names, the majority gives its names. This is the president's decision.
Himself.
Okay.
And if the president has already pronounced himself on the four commissioners, then you can as well
see where this will end.
This will end.
Yeah.
So their chances of survival are very, very, very minimal.
Jamila, I'll come to you in a moment. I think you'll give us the final word on this one. Linus, when we're talking about the options for the commissioners, this is a completely different scenario from the Ahmed Isaac team. If they choose to resign, I mean, because we know commissioners of independent commissions in the country based on the Constitution have security of tenure. If they choose to resign, do they get all their perks that were due to them? Remember, these commissioners have actually been in office less than a year.
Actually, it's 1 year because they got into office on September 2nd, 2021.
So a year, but perhaps the shortest serving commissioners, I think, in the history of electoral management bodies in the country. So what option do they have if they resign? Do they then get payment for the next 4 years?
Not at all, not at all. And there is a precedent. You remember in 2017, there were some resignations from the IEBC. If you remember that vice chairperson
Colin Kata, yes.
Machanya also resigned.
Right.
Paul
Kurgat. And remember also Roslyn Akombe did leave the commission.
Yeah.
And to the best of our knowledge, they were not eligible to make any claims about the remainder of their term. So if they choose to resign, that is the rooted text. There is no compensation for that. You are choosing, to exit, and then there'll be absolutely no benefit to that end. But like Francis says, we may see a bit of drama. We may see a bit of a fight back. One last resort would be the court, and I could see when you hear Apollo Mboya, the counsel, speaking, you could see hints of, is this process fair? Is this process following the dictates of 250? Is it giving the commissioners a fair hearing? And of course, remember, he pulled the president's tweet that called the commissioners rogue and said, this is already a decided matter.
Yeah.
It's been decided that they must go. But the bottom line is, this is a political process.
Yeah.
This is a political contest by any other means. It's actually, in my view, an extension of the 2022 presidential election that was held on the 9th of August, results announced on the 15th of August. This is an extension of that war. So it will still take a political dimension. But here is the dilemma that President Ruto and his side will face. This process runs the risk of looking like the reconstitution of the IEBC by one party. This we know very well has not gone down well since 2007, when President Mwai Kibaki decided to appoint commissioners without taking into consideration the unwritten gentleman's arrangement that also says you should allow the IPPG agreement that then says that parties, political opposition parties, should also nominate commissioners to the IEBC. Should this process go the victor's route only, where you purge, get rid of the 4, you have these other 3 retirements coming up at the end, sometime next
January,
month. You are constituting the commission, the panel that will interview the new commissioners to replace those who are going. So there is this risk that the president constantly runs of looking like he is reconstituting the IEBC in its own image. At some point down the road, we'll be looking as a country at what the panel looks like, who exactly gets into the panel, what are the mechanisms of constituting the IEBC. Because if it's not seen as inclusive, if it's seen as narrow in terms of who gets in there, then it runs the risk of reducing the IEBC to a body again that will be seen as constituted by one political side. And that won't look good going into 2027. But again, in politics, especially in Kenya, looking good is not a priority.
It is.
And even as we finish, we take a break. We would wonder when will actually IEBC settle as an electoral management body, because we look at how things have been from way back in 2007 after the tumultuous elections and the post-election violence, and we had the Kriegler Commission come in and the Waki Commission, and all the blame was put on the ECK then, the Kivuitu-led one, about how they managed the elections. Then we changed the law, we had the IEBC, there were issues
in
with
fact, we had the IEC, remember,
first,
yes,
and then we had the Isaac Hassan-led IEBC. There were issues there, they had to resign. We've had the Chebukati-led one, where we saw the resignation of the four commissioners. We had the 2017 elections, the nullification of the presidential elections, with the Supreme Court also laying all the blame at the door of the IEBC. And then now what we are seeing now. And even after the whole process is done and dusted, and we end up having new commissioners going into the IEBC offices, that office is already almost tainted with the history and the intrigues and the politics and the distrust and everything that goes with it. An electoral management body is a big deal. Yes, we're going to election, we have 5 years to decide what we want to do, but really the question is, when will the IEBC ever really settle?
Yvonne,
a minute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now that we have spoken about reconstituting the commission, sounds like we are talking about a new electoral management body from early next year. If, for example, this matter ends up in court, like it is most likely to happen, then the process of recruiting a new IEBC chairperson and 2 commissioners will be ongoing as these 4 fight for their survival, however long it takes. So it means for a period of about a month or thereabout, there won't be commissioners in the commission. Of course, there are some by-elections that are coming up early next year. Those will continue because the secretariat still exists. The CEO, Marjan, is on, together with other directors and other members of staff. So the by-elections will continue. But now the attention will now focus to who becomes the next members of IEBC in terms of the commissioners. The selection panel that now is in law, once the president assents to the amendment bill that was approved this evening, actually late this evening, that bill was passed at 7:30 p.m. or thereabout. The selection panel will be 7-member. It will have 2 persons nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission, a man and a woman. It will have 1 person.
That was reduced from 4, right?
That was reduced from 4. Because the feeling then, and this was a matter that was taken to court, was that the Parliamentary Service Commission, with 4 nominees out of 7, was getting undue advantage over everybody else. Then 1 person who will be nominated by the Public Service Commission, and another person who will be nominated by the Political Parties Liaison Committee, another person who will be nominated by the Law Society of Kenya, and 2 persons who will be nominated by the Interreligious Council, 7-member. So now the question is, who will be members of this panel? Because this panel will give us the next crop of commissioners. So if you want to see the next crop of commissioners, look at the panel, because the panel will be, Linas likes calling it the pipe. This is the pipe that will give us the outcome. So the best way to know the political intrigues of that time and the political intentions and interests of that time is to look at the selection panel. Whoever ends up in that panel will give us an idea of the face of the commissioners. And finally, remember, the next crop of commissioners or the next IEBC has 2 major assignments. 1, conducting the general election of 2027. But there's also another interesting
Boundaries
assignment.
delimitation.
Boundaries delimitation.
Which is in 2024.
It's supposed to be done between 8 years and 12 years.
Yeah.
The last time we had a boundaries delimitation discussion was done by IIBRC, Independent
Interim
Independent Boundaries Review Commission that was chaired by Andrew Legale.
Yes.
That is the last time we had that discussion.
Yeah.
There was an attempt to introduce the discussion some time back last year, but now the feeling was it will be too close to an election, so you're going to invite other discussions. And remember, this boundaries delimitation also brings in clan issues,
it's very emotive,
community issues, and so on and so forth. So the next commission and commissioners has two very, very interesting assignments, and that will also inform the kind of persons who will be nominated to be the next commissioners.
That's right. So we'll see what happens. Tomorrow is the day. From tomorrow, the end begins for the 4, maybe for all the 7, because by January, you know, the others are going as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Hustlers Fund. It was finally launched a day before the 1st of December, and the 24 hours of that, what's been the successes, the challenges so far in just 24 hours of the much touted and much promised Hustlers Fund. This is Newsgang. We'll be right back.